The forehand strike is the fundamental motor skill where a ball is struck on the forehand side of a player.
The forehand strike is fundamental to student learning and movement because it ensures lifelong involvement in physical activity. Without proficiency in fundamental motor skills, students are less likely to explore options available to them to establish and maintain active lifestyles. Children who do not master fundamental motor skills, such as the forehand strike, are less willing to learn more complex motor skills and will avoid activities that could expose them to public failure.
The skill should be introduced in Year 2, so 7 to 8 years old, and mastered by the end of Year 5, so 10 to 11 years old. This depends, of course, on the individual capability of the student, as well as the quality and quantity of teaching instruction. 240 to 600 minutes of instruction time are needed to develop a fundamental motor skill to a proficient level.
Introducing this skill to a 7-year-old should be done as followed. Begin with a stationary ball positioned on top of a tee or a large cone. Place footprint cutouts on the floor to demonstrate proper standing position. Instruct the student to position their feet on the markers and explain the purpose of standing side-on to the target. Instruct the student to pick a spot on the ball on which to focus their eyes. Explain to the student to position the arms in a T shape at shoulder height on either side of their body. Explain the hip to shoulder rotation to the student. Instruct the student to step forward with their opposite foot whilst performing the hip to shoulder rotation. Whilst doing so, they will strike the ball off the tee with their palm. Repeat this process, only introducing a small handled paddle once the child has grasped the basic concept of the action.
Progress from hitting the ball with your hand when introducing the skill, to a small bat like a ping pong paddle, to a longer handled bat like a tennis racket. Progress from a stationary ball on a batting tee to a slow moving ball like a balloon, to a suspended moving object, to a bounce ball, to a thrown ball. The size of the ball should progress from large ball like a balloon to a smaller ball like a tennis ball. We'll expand on this in the demonstration.
The following is a demonstration of the key teaching points involved with teaching the fundamental motor skill called the forehand strike to grade 1 or 2 students. The equipment required to teach and perform this skill is a large cone or tee, seen here, a tennis ball, a small handled paddle, and a small tennis racket. The first step is to place a tennis ball on the tee and mark out footprints on the ground on which the student will stand whilst performing the skill. The next step is to instruct the student to stand with their feet on the markers so that they are front on to the tee and side on to the target. The next step is to instruct the child to position their arms in a T shape on either side of their body. The next step is to instruct the child to pick a spot on the tennis ball on which to focus their eyes while they perform the skill. The next step is to explain and demonstrate to the child the hip to shoulder rotation. The next step is to instruct the child to step forward with their opposite foot whilst performing the hip to shoulder rotation. Explain to the child that whilst performing this action, they will strike the ball off the tee with their palm, following through to their shoulder. Repeat this process until you feel the child has adequately grasped the technique or action of the forehand strike. Once the child has achieved adequate success with the skill, introduce the use of a small handled paddle, keeping the ball on the tee. The next progression is to have the child drop and hit the ball out of their own hand. It's important to give a demonstration of this to the class before asking them to perform this action. The next progression is to put the children in pairs and have one partner underarm throw the ball so that it bounces once and their partner can perform the forehand strike.
Common errors in the forearm strike are failure to focus on the ball or incorrect grip, a chopping action when hitting the ball, failure to turn the side of the body in the direction of the strike, and poor sequencing of technique for the forearm strike.
Whilst performing this task, we utilise the following resources: an article titled Fundamental Motor Skills, a Manual for Classroom Teachers from the Community Information Service at the Department of Education in Melbourne, an article named Get Skilled, Get Active in K6 Resource to Support the Teaching of Fundamental Motor Skills from the New South Wales Department of Education and Training, an article named Fundamental Motor Skills, an Activities Resource for Classroom Teachers from the Physical and Sport Education section of the Department of Education in Melbourne, and the prescribed text, Learning to Teach Health and Physical Education, the Student, the Teacher and the Curriculum from French's Forest, Pearson Education, Australia.